All right, let's be honest for a second. Have you ever been in a situation where you just went along with the group even though you totally disagreed? Today, we're going to dive deep into that feeling and explore the incredible and often invisible power that a group has over every single one of us.
Oh, yeah, we've all been there. Maybe it's in a work meeting or just out with friends. You just bite your tongue, nod along, keep the peace. It just feels easier. But what is actually happening in our brains when we do that? To figure it out, we're going to go to a place where the stakes could not possibly be higher.
So, picture this the setup from the classic film 12 Angry Men. A young man's life is hanging in the balance, and it looks like an open and shut case. You've got 11 jurors who are absolutely certain he's guilty. And then there's just one juror who isn't so sure. I mean, can you imagine the pressure in that room? And that's the central mystery we're unpacking today. How does one person manage to turn the tide against 11? And on a deeper level, why is it so incredibly difficult to be that person, to be the one who stands alone? That jury room is going to be our laboratory. Okay, so first things first. We need to get a handle on the fundamental force that's at work when you find yourself standing against, well, everyone. This isn't just a movie plot device. It's a core concept that social psychologists have been wrestling with for decades.
The official name for it is conformity. It's just our natural human tendency to kind of align ourselves with what the group is doing. But here's the catch. It's not just one simple impulse. It's actually being driven by two very powerful and very different desires that we all have. So conformity is really a two-headed beast. On the one hand, you've got what's called normative influence. This is the one we all get. It's the simple desire to be liked, to fit in. It's that fear of being the weird one out. But then there's informational influence. This is totally different. This is our desire to be correct. It's that voice in your head that goes, well, if everyone thinks that, maybe they know something I don't.
So just how powerful are these forces in the real world? I mean, really? Well, lucky for us, a brilliant and kind of sneaky experiment back in the 1950s put this to the test in the most direct way imaginable. The setup was dead simple. A group of people gets shown two cards. On one card, there's a line. On the other, there are three lines of different lengths. All they had to do was say which of the three lines on the right was the same length as the one on the left. Seems pretty easy, right?
Ah, but here is the twist. In the room, there was only one real participant. Everyone else was an actor, and they were all told to give the same, obviously wrong, answer. So put yourself in that person's shoes. You can see with your own eyes that the answer is C. But one by one, every single person ahead of you confidently says B. What do you do when it's your turn? The result is genuinely staggering. 75% of the participants went along with the clearly wrong answer at least one time. Let that sink in. 3/4 of people were willing to go against the evidence of their own eyes just to side with the group. And this just perfectly shows our two types of influence at play. When they were interviewed later, some people said they actually started to doubt what they were seeing. That's informational influence. But most of them admitted they knew the group was wrong, but they just didn't want to make waves. And that is pure classic normative influence. Okay, so agreeing on the wrong line in a lab test, no big deal. But what happens when these exact same psychological pressures show up in a high-stakes, real-world situation? That's when conformity can evolve into something far, far more dangerous. It's a phenomenon known as groupthink. This is what happens when the desire for everybody to just get along becomes so strong that it completely overrides any kind of critical thinking. The need to not upset the balance becomes more important than making a smart, rational decision. So, how can you spot it? Well, there are a few telltale signs. It often starts with this weird illusion that everyone is in complete agreement. Then, if anyone dares to speak up with a different opinion, they face a ton of pressure to get back in line. Pretty soon, people just start censoring their own doubts. You even get these so-called mind guards, people who actively protect the group from any outside information that might challenge the consensus. And the consequences of this can be absolutely catastrophic. The Challenger disaster is just a tragic textbook case of groupthink. You had engineers who were warning, begging, that the O-rings could fail because of the cold weather on launch day. But because of intense group pressure to move forward, those warnings were tragically pushed aside. So if these group dynamics are so powerful, how can we get a better handle on them? Well, modern research is taking us beyond simple observation. Scientists are now starting to model these complex human interactions using computers. One way to think about this is to see a group as an influence network. Now, you could have a totally balanced network where everyone's opinion influences everyone else's equally. But let's be real, that's rarely how it works. In reality, most groups are hierarchical. Some voices just carry way more weight than others. But here's a totally fascinating finding from this research. It turns out the best group decisions don't always come from those perfectly democratic, balanced groups. In fact, the optimal setup is often one where the group figures out who its best performers are, and then learns to give their opinions more influence. But how does a group do that? The models found this really weird but powerful mechanism called social discounting bias. This is going to sound backwards, but it means that people in a group actually benefit from moderately downgrading how good they think their peers are. It acts like a little corrective lens, stopping the group from getting too carried away by someone who's just confident, but not necessarily correct. Okay, so we're armed with all this new knowledge. Let's go back to that stuffy, tense jury room. We've seen the crushing pressure to conform. We've seen the real dangers of groupthink. So now, let's talk about the antidote.
This antidote is called minority influence. It's this incredible phenomenon where one single person or a tiny minority can stand firm and actually change the minds of the entire group. It is the force that allows one juror to stand up to 11.
And this is the absolute key. Let's go back to that line experiment one more time. They found that if just one of the actors broke from the group and gave the correct answer, the real participants' conformity rate absolutely plummeted. All it takes is having one ally in dissent. That one other voice gives people the courage to trust themselves. And this is exactly what happens in 12 Angry Men. Once that first juror stands his ground, it gives the next person permission to voice their own doubts.
And those influence network models, they revealed one last surprising little dynamic about all this. There is something called the first speaker effect. The person who talks first gets to anchor the whole conversation, and they have a huge immediate impact. But, and this is a big but, there's also a late speaker effect. The person who waits, listens to what everyone else has to say, and then offers their thoughts, that person is often seen as a better performer and actually gains more influence over the long haul. So, all of this leaves us with a final thought. Understanding these powerful forces actually gives you a choice. The next time you find yourself in a group discussion, what role will you play? Are you going to be the anchor who sets the tone? Are you going to be the dissenter who saves the group from groupthink? Or will you be the synthesizer who has the final, most considered word? The power of the crowd is real, there's no doubt about it, but so is the power of the individual.